The chilling laughter from Ryuk's lips rang out through the area of the fest as he rose upright completely from the tree he had collapsed in. With widened eyes, the four creatures watched as the battered-looking Ryuk instantly had all the ashes on him fade away. They watched him twisting his back and neck. An interesting man once told me that the sense of morality in war is a privilege. Right or wrong, what does it matter? Ryuk said, slowly walking towards the beasts, his thoughts flashing with the image of Instructor Dravik Kane's speech about war. And even though right or wrong doesn't matter, somehow, I like being on the right side still. Perhaps it makes me feel less guilty about the battle? He asked bizarrely, coming to a stop 10 meters away. It seems we have both established it then. Even if I leave behind all the trophies I've obtained, even if I swore to never return to your forest, and swore to never kill one more beast, you still wouldn't let me live, would you? Now, it wouldn't be wrong for me to fight back for my life, would it? Everything I will do from now on can be referred to as pure self-defense. Now, I fight for a moral reason, and I feel more comfortable, Ryuk stated with a grin as the crow narrowed its eyes at him before it cackled. So what does it matter? The crow asked. Against all four of us, you will still be buried here. Right or wrong, what does it matter if you'll end up a corpse anyway? The crow mocked with obvious disdain. Ryuk's eyes flashed. He actually said that too, Ryuk muttered. All that matters now is who comes out alive or dead. Now it's all up to survival. The true goal of war. Slowly, the shirt he wore began disintegrating, revealing his perfectly honed upper muscular body, leaving only the trousers on him. Raising his hand, Ryuk brushed his hair back, looking up at the bright moon in the sky. Somehow, it feels so much more beautiful. Now come. Let's war, shall we? Attack! The crow's high-pitched voice rang out, and instantly, all hell broke loose as the crow shot backward from the battle, while the three enormous beasts soared into the sky. Then, 3 attacks blasted towards Ryuk from all sides, covering his small figure. A gigantic fist from above burst into flames from the horrific friction with the air, the ground beneath him curling into nothing from the sheer power. A powerful lightning bolt slammed in from the side, like the wrath of an angered lightning god. Boom! Ryuk was involuntarily sent up into the sky as the infernal tusk beast slammed its huge hoof down, channeling the heat from its molten core into its legs, causing the air beneath to shatter into dust and lava. The upward attack made Ryuk's body involuntarily fly toward the massive flaming fist that covered the entire sky, his hairs standing on end from the electrified current rapidly approaching from the side. To all of these attacks, Ryuk laughed like a madman as he clenched his fists, various tattoos flashing all over his arms, and then, boom! He smashed his fist against the gigantic falling infernal fist slamming downward toward him. Their clash instantly caused Ryuk's entire right arm to become submerged in cracks. And then, boom! His arm exploded into nothing. Mere seconds after the explosion, boom! A gigantic hole appeared in Ryuk's stomach, the other side clearly visible as the lightning bolt pierced through, sending him crashing unconscious to the ground. But the bolt never exhausted itself. Instead, it rebounded midair, splitting into countless strands that instantly reached for him, piercing through his skin like daggers. With such speed that it was over in mere seconds, the battle had ended. Ryuk's charred body lay against a tree, riddled with gaping holes, one of his arms reduced to nothing but pulp. The smell of burning lava leaked from his wounds. A dark, evil cackling rang out from the crow as it flew back to the shoulder of the ape from where it had been hiding before. The 4 beasts walked forward, glancing back at the pathetic body of their enemy. You're not saying anything anymore, righteous warrior. Come on. Run that pathetic mouth of yours once more. What's wrong? Too tired to muster a word? The bird mocked with a wicked cackle as thoughts rang out in Ryuk's mind. Hey Ryuk, let me teach that damn crow a lesson, Isha said, trying to leave the pet world. But shock clouded her face when she found the space suddenly restricting her, preventing her from coming out. What happened? I can no longer leave the space at will anymore, Isha thought in shock. Meanwhile, Ryuk, struggling with immense pain, slowly raised his head, his gaze locking onto the four beasts. Then, "Oh, you birdy bastard!" Ryuk called out, blood unconsciously pouring down from his lips. His eyes burned with pain, but he ignored it all as he pointed at the small crow who replied, "Hoot! I'd be looking behind me if I were you," Ryuk stated. The crow chortled in mockery. "I won't fall for that." In the next instant, the head of the crow soared towards Ryuk, having been severed clean in half from its neck. Ryuk stretched out his hands, catching the dismembered head as it landed in his grasp. With bloodied lips, he peered into the bird's eyes, which now held ultimate horror, an expression that Ryuk found so amusing to watch. "Tell me, birdie, how does it feel for your greatest power, your so-called wise intelligence, to end up being the death of you?" Ryuk asked with a grin, his hands slowly squeezing tighter. "You bastard!" Dark blood splattered through the air as the bird's head was crushed into nothing by Ryuk, sending showers of thick black liquid across his face. "Now, I feel more at peace." A damn-talking crow with a cultivation stage at the plane of ascension, yet allowed to stay on the shoulders of beasts at the cataclysm stage. Ryu could somehow guess that the cataclysm beasts were using the crow's intelligence, which seemed sharper than normal, and that bothered him a great deal. That was why he had made it his first goal to bring an end to the creature first. The remaining beasts stood in shock as they watched the lower body of the crow slowly fall and land onto the ground with a plushy sound. And immediately, angered roars filled the air as thick murderous intent burst forth. Just like Ryuk had guessed, the crow was truly allowed amongst their ranks solely due to its intelligence. The forest had always been a constant plateau of battle amongst the beasts, and those battles were even more fatal among the cataclysm stage beasts, as they found it hard to kill one another, often ending up too wounded in the end. That was until the crow came. Informed that they were the strongest, they all could have designated territories, with each beast remaining within its domain and not venturing into others. Since they were the strongest, they would have nothing disturbing them, and they could finally gain the peace they wanted. The suggestion was made by the intelligent crow, and the beasts had followed after it. And truly, just as it had said, peace had reigned. Succeeding in that decision, the crow had been respected by them, enough for it to be in their presence without worry. And as time went by, its intelligence only proved to be more useful, further increasing its status in their eyes. Yet, the crow that had been with them, that had helped them all through these years, was now on the ground, its neck still spurting out blood. It had been killed, even though the three of them had stood there and earlier sworn to protect it from danger. It angered them, and instantly, they turned their fiery crimson eyes toward Ryuk. The ghostly white creature had done too much damage to their world. He must be stopped. Boom! The ground shook as they all dashed with speed toward Ryuk, but suddenly, "Activate true skill, Sovereign of Frost." The whisper gently echoed through the area. Yet, everything came to a chilling crawl. The wind stilled. Every sound died. Movements slowed down to insignificance. The battlefield, once teeming with chaos, fell into an eerie silence. A pulse of frigid ice energy suddenly erupted outward from beneath Ryuk's feet, sweeping through the entire air like silent spatial tears. The ground beneath him fractured, only to be instantly encased in a pristine frost, spreading outward toward the entire forest like an unstoppable tide. His eyes glowed with an ethereal blue color, the runic image of a snowflake appearing in their depths as his body became wreathed in crystalline ice armor, glowing with intricate snowflake runes. His short white hair turned snowy white, elongating as it cascaded down beneath his broad shoulders. Ryuk exhaled loudly, intense icy cold frost leaving his lips with every breath. The brutish roar left the ape's lips as it ignited, lunging forward toward Ryuk with full force, intense flames from friction rippling outward. But the next instant, as it reached 5 meters away from Ryuk, the fire didn't just flicker out. It collapsed into an open stillness, frozen in mid-motion, trapped in a cage of ice before shattering into pieces. Appearing a meter from Ryuk, the massive fist, seemingly capable of pulverizing the earth, slowed down massively, its power and momentum reduced to half. Ryuk stretched his hand to the side. A gigantic frost hammer appeared, coated in various runic lines, and the ice beneath him shattered into pieces as he took a single step forward, his body turning with precision as the head of the hammer lunged forward with overwhelming power, smashing against the fist, and then, boom! The ground crumbled to pieces as the ape took repeated steps backward from the sheer force, its power shaking the land. And it only came to a stop 30 meters away. Its eyes flashed in shock as it looked at its own hands. Its fingers twisted out of their position, encased in a chilling ice. A cold harumph left the ape's lips as it lifted its fist, shattering the ice into nothing. It turned its gaze back to Ryuk, who slowly stretched his hands outward toward the three beasts, runic lines flashing within them as he muttered, "Ice Sword Graveyard." The sound of the ground being ripped apart rang out, but it suddenly sounded more like blades being driven into the dirt. The beast's eyes flashed with dread when they witnessed hundreds upon hundreds of ice swords forming midair with Ryuk's outstretched hands. Yet, instead of flying toward them, each and every sword was plunged into the snow-ridden ground, turning the world into a graveyard of buried ice swords. The sound of footsteps rang out as Ryuk stepped forward, his expression colder than the ice he wielded. His long snow-white hair rustling in the air, as if gravity had been forced still around him, ceasing to exist. "Come now," he muttered to them as he stepped forward. But the beasts were no cowards. Instantly, they charged toward Ryuk, without an ounce of fear. Who were they? They were great ape beasts, the absolute rulers of this world. They were the absolute strongest, and never would they be found cowering before another creature. The air parted into nothing as a powerful thunderbolt struck, racing downward toward Ryuk. He slowly lifted his hand to the side, uprooting a sword from the ground, and then he slashed forward with speed, his ice sword slamming through the center of the lightning pillar, ripping it into pieces. Boom! The sound of heavy thumps echoed, coming from the tusk boar, which lowered its magma-covered tusks and charged forward toward Ryuk with incredible speed. The ice ground melted from the sheer heat of its body, and in a blink, it was before Ryuk, its raised tusk piercing forward with power. A loud, heavy growl rang out as Ryuk found the gigantic boar before him, and instantly, his legs anchored to the ground, the runic lines in his hands bursting out with blue particles. His strength maxed out, and his both hands slammed forward toward the boar's gigantic tusks, grabbing onto them as the ground beneath them instantly collapsed into nothing. A groan of pain left Ryuk's lips as veins appeared all over his arms, stopping the boar in its tracks. Within a split second, cracks spread farther and farther beneath both the tusks and Ryuk's standstill. But suddenly, Ryuk felt the tusk grow incredibly hot. And in the next instant, a weird line opened up on the tusk's nose, and intense lava suddenly burst out of its face. At such close proximity, and holding the boar down, Ryuk had no time to dodge, causing the lava to instantly pour straight toward his face, covering him completely. The ground beneath him tore into nothing as his legs dug into the earth. The boar finally managed to take a leading hand, having surprised Ryuk, but it didn't take long before all motion came to a freezing stop once more. Its eyes flashed in shock as it watched the lava, which ought to have burned Ryuk to ashes, suddenly pulverize into nothing but cold white steam, revealing a Ryuk who didn't even have the slightest burn on him. Additional effect activated. All fire and heat-based attacks are automatically nullified. Guess your flames aren't that much to be scared of. Ryuk's voice resounded in the boar's ears as he suddenly let go of the strength he was putting into his arms, throwing himself above the boar. Immediately, the boar lunged forward from the sudden force disappearing, and in the next instant, all it saw was a gigantic beam of lightning smashing straight into its face, blowing it back with immense power. High in the air, Ryuk found the ape soaring toward him, its gigantic feet slamming down, overshadowing Ryuk. And in that instant, Ryuk turned upside down, kicking out with his right leg. The air shook from the collision, the space shattering continuously, as Ryuk was sent flying downward, smashing into the icy forest land. The ground crumbled hard the instant the ape landed, and instantly, two more arms ripped out from beneath its shoulders, bathed in bodily fluids. Clenched and instantly, phantoms of gigantic fists appeared all over the ground as the ape smashed its furious fists hundreds of times against the floor where Ryuk had fallen, pulverizing the entire ground for 20 seconds straight. But then, something large flew by with speed. One of the swords dipped into the ground, ripping apart close to the side of the ape, as a thin line of blood spread out from the side of its eyes, blinding it. A painful howl rang out as the ape staggered backward in speed, wobbling as it did so. And immediately, a figure flew out from within the cracked chasm on the ground, body completely battered. But immediately, once elevated above the ground, his body rapidly crystallized, healing up all his wounds. Jumping into the air, Ryuk appeared in the sky, face to face with the ape, which instantly sent a powerful slam toward him. But he weaved through the finger, rapidly running up its furry arms. In an instant, he appeared before the beast's remaining open eye, a white sword rippling out from below, appearing in his grasp instantly. Ryuk stabbed forward toward the beast's remaining eye. Instantly, the ape reacted, its legs expanding and instantly pushing it backward as it narrowly dodged Ryuk's blow to its eyes. But Ryuk was unrelenting. Solidifying the space beneath him, he jumped up higher into the sky, spinning his body as he did so. And then, go! A white object flashed through the night sky, rippling with speed toward the ape, whose eyes widened in shock as it looked at the sword. It had clearly dodged it before, but now, it was appearing in the heavens before its eyes. And then, the sword pierced straight into its eye. Instantly, wailing up, the tissues and blood spilled out in a mournful, angered roar, as the beast's remaining eyes stared hatefully at Ryuk's figure, soaring away from above. With an angered roar, a gigantic fist slammed toward Ryuk, but this time, there were various runic lines appearing all over the fists, momentarily increasing its power. It seems the ape had finally decided to go all out. But seeing the massive fist racing toward him, Ryuk grinned mockingly as he slowly spread his hands out and then, boom! Instantly, an explosion of ice appeared in the beast's eyes, as the ice sword buried within its skull suddenly exploded, powerful enough to freeze its brain instantly. The ferocious fist hung in the air, unmoving. Ryuk easily weaved past it, his body rapidly changing shape. Hundreds of nanobots appeared on his body, a veil of nanobots covering him, but most importantly, a ginormous dark scythe flaring with dark energy appeared in Ryuk's grasp as he arrived at the top of the ape's forehead, landing on it and staring at its frozen expression of shock. Goodbye now. The angered roars of the two other beasts rang out as they raced toward Ryuk, who raised up his scythe. And then, with one swift motion, a dark light flashed through the world, as the nightmare scythe cleaved through the beast's head, a line appearing straight through the ape's entire face. Ryuk easily jumped off, just as the remaining attack from the two beasts, meant for him, blasted onto the ape's head, blowing it up and sending it flying into the distance. The ground shook violently as the ape's body, followed by its two-spitted head, collapsed onto the earth, a massive amount of blood seeping out, staining the entire area red. Furious roars rang out from the lips of the beasts as they looked at the dead body of the ape, their eyes turning fiery red. Slowly, they turned their gaze to the side, where Ryuk stood in the air, the ginormous dark scythe resting on his shoulder, his features shielded by an ever-changing glow. Now come. Let's bring an end to this. He killed Lugar too. This was the thought that echoed through the minds of the two remaining A-grade beasts as they looked at Ryuk, whose dualed eyes were turned toward them. Right now, it was like the entity before them was no longer the one they previously knew. His former weak-looking form was gone, and now he seemed like the reincarnation of death itself. A metallic hum filled the air, deep, unearthly. The creature before them had no flesh nor bone, but an ever-changing mass of writhing nanobots, each one pulsing with an eerie black glow. The form seemed unstable, yet absolute, shifting between monstrous and humanoid, an existence that defied reason. Then came the most frightening object. The weapon, the colossal blade, forged from nanobots and abyssal energy, distorted the very space around it. Its mere vibration left the air slicing apart, vanishing into a bizarre darkness, as if the atoms themselves were being erased to nothing. But that wasn't all. For a split second, both beasts could sense how powerful the scythe was. Yet looking at it, they barely noticed the flashes of dark blood, Luger's blood, being absorbed into the blade, causing its hum to grow even louder. As if, the blade devours blood to grow stronger? The horrifying thought rang through their minds as a grin appeared on Ryuk's lips. What's wrong, righteous beasts? Afraid to take the first step, Ryuk asked, stepping forward. The ground beneath him hardened, as he climbed toward the creatures, whose eyes flashed with terror. And then, suddenly, they did something inexplicable. Boom! The ground caved in, and the air around them flapped wildly, lifting some trees into the sky. A swirling tempest descended. Yet when it finally quieted down, Ryuk's jaw dropped. The beasts, they were gone. They ran? He thought in shock, finding that the beasts had completely disappeared from his gaze. And then, congratulations. Host has defeated a Rattleconda. Total EXP. Plus 25,000 EXP. Congratulations. Host has defeated an Obsidian Juggernaut. Total EXP. Plus 25,000 EXP. Congratulations. Host has defeated a Thunderwolf Colossus. Total EXP. Plus 25,000 EXP. Congratulations. Host has defeated an Infernal Tusk Beast. Total EXP. Plus 25,000 EXP. The Thunderwolf Colossus and the Infernal Tusk Beast ran away, and they're still alive. How could I have defeated them? Ryuk asked in surprise, but then he paused in his step before grinning loudly. So it's like that, huh? He mused to himself, deactivating all of his skills and returning to his human form as he gently landed on the ground. Ryuk knew well why the system had marked the creatures as defeated. It was because they had run away. Their act of fleeing was an admission of their defeat. Just like the blue-scaled Ryuk once said, "One isn't truly defeated until their will has been crushed." And Ryuk's overwhelming power had been enough to make the remaining beasts run for their lives, automatically surrendering. That itself was a defeat in its own right, and the system seemed to acknowledge that. Ryuk could chase after them and kill them, but somehow he found it unnecessary. He might have wanted to do it to gain more EXP points, but he already had them now. There was no more reason to follow after them, so he let them be. His gaze returned to what was important as he jumped into the air, soaring for a few meters before stopping midair. His eyes turned downward as he quickly located the abodes of the fallen beasts. Wasting no time, Ryuk advanced forward, heading first to the place where the Obsidian Juggernaut had fallen. Congratulations. Host has found an A-grade treasure. Name: the Fault Heart Core. Description: a gem that is the heart of an entire planet, formed from the violent collision of celestial bodies over millennia, amassing a solid aura of obsidian and tectonic energy. This stone is a god-tier cultivation material that significantly increases one's physical power through its immense gravitational force. The system announced as Ryuk lifted the dark gem, causing it to disappear from where it lay. He then moved swiftly in search of the next treasures. Congratulations. Host has found an A-grade treasure. Name: the Storm Crown. Description: a glowing orb of lightning, a relic formed from centuries of trapped thunder. It absorbs all lightning elements within thousands of kilometers, making it an invaluable artifact for boosting the power of lightning elementals. Surprisingly, when Ryuk arrived at the body of the Infernal Tusk Beast, he couldn't find anything at all. Strange. Judging by its strength, it should have held a treasure equal to the others, yet there was nothing. He shrugged it off. He had already acquired so many artifacts that he was more than satisfied. Finally, I have become the strongest here. Ryuk declared to himself as he soared farther into the sky, spreading his arms as the rushing air flapped wildly around his body. But then, his eyes snapped open as he noticed a bizarre light in the sky. Lifting his gaze, Ryuk saw a few numbers written on a pitch-black panel in the sky. Ones that shifted constantly, yet he understood them clearly. 7:24:57:01. A timer? Ryuk asked in surprise. Then, another notification flashed. It seems that just as the host had guessed, this truly is a trial ground. Currently, the host has passed the test to claim the absolute top of the hierarchy. The timer may indicate how much time is left before the host is transported away from this realm. The system hypothesized as Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed. It made sense, but he still had something to do. So I have a week left, huh? That should be just enough for me to finish the construction of my apex realm. Ryuk mused to himself as he narrowed his eyes below him, inhaling sharply. The devastation is insane. He thought to himself, looking at the forest. Half of the entire plain had been completely wiped out, reduced to nothing but a deep chasm. A result of his battle with the beasts. Now, I need to find a peaceful place to cultivate and hopefully reach the Dominion Plain stage. He murmured before descending, heading toward an untouched region where he could finally prepare for the next stage of his ascension. With the threats of the beasts gone, Ryuk felt more at ease, having somehow completed the trial. He could now focus entirely on cultivation. Settling in a quiet area of the forest, he slowly sat on the bare ground and inhaled deeply, clearing his mind. His heart was still beating hard from his victory, but he forced himself to calm down, focusing deeply on his body's state. Somehow, the deeper he delved into himself, the harder it became to perceive his human body. His hands no longer felt like arms, nor did his legs seem to belong to him. Instead, he felt completely different, as if he had no physical form, constantly shifting, adapting, dissolving into his surroundings. It was a strange sensation, a reminder of how his body had truly evolved into something else. Even now, Ryuk couldn't say he fully understood himself or his strength, though he had certainly learned a great deal of it. With his heart finally steady, he shut his eyes. The entire world faded into silence, and when he opened them once more, he found himself on a small snowy plain, with greenery stretching into the far distance. "And what are you doing, Isha?" Ryuk suddenly called out, turning his gaze to the side. There Isha stood, her claws tapping against the incubator where Ryuk had placed the egg within the pet world. The very egg that held the void entity. "Ha! Ryuk? You're here." Isha flinched, clearly startled by his sudden appearance. Ryuk narrowed his eyes at the frost wyvern, who seemed to be trying to hide something from him. "What was I doing?" Isha echoed, her voice slightly nervous. "Oh, I was just, checking the state of the egg. I mean, the machine. I've never seen one like that before in my life, you know." "Ha-ha!" She laughed nervously, shifting under Ryuk's sharp gaze. A bead of sweat rolled down her neck. But suddenly Ryuk smiled. "Good then," he said simply before turning away. His figure gradually faded, drifting deeper into the pet world. Isha exhaled loudly, relieved as Ryuk disappeared into the distance. She had been about to return her focus to the egg when she suddenly froze. Her head snapped in the direction Ryuk had gone. "Wait, where is he going?" she mused, furrowing her brows. Isha had never really explored the pet world before. All she had ever seen was the endless grassy plain. She had assumed there was no end to it, that it was just an infinite empty space. But now, seeing Ryuk disappear into a particular direction, her curiosity was piqued. After 5 minutes of debating whether to stay or sneak after him, she chuckled evilly. Grinning mischievously, she silently took off, gliding along the path Ryuk had taken. A little over an hour later, Ryuk finally arrived at the edge of the pet world, where a massive tree stood. Looking at it, he recalled the notification he had received earlier after his awakening. "Congratulations, host has awakened a part of his primordial tree. which belongs to his half-jade dragon lineage. So this is what it means, huh? Ryuk mused to himself as he gazed at the primordial tree. Previously, the tree had looked absolutely dead, with only a small patch in the middle hiding its frosty white core, an indication of his ice apex realm. But now, the blue side of the tree had strange runic lines glowing across its surface. The blue light pulsating over it radiated an unusual energy, the energy of Aetheris. It was proof that he had truly awakened a part of his Jade Dragon bloodline. He moved toward the tree, placing a hand against the soft blue glow emanating from it. Closing his eyes and dipping his consciousness in, Ryuk couldn't see anything, only a vast sense of power. It felt like being caught in the middle of an endless ocean or standing at the peak of an impossibly high mountain. The sensation sent his heart trembling with both shock and reverence. Yet, somehow, he could also sense that almost all of this power was locked, completely inaccessible to him. Soon, Ryuk thought to himself, withdrawing his gaze from the glowing runes and turning toward the other half of the tree, the obsidian dark side. This signified his null bloodline. But unlike the other half, there wasn't much activity here, because Ryuk had not yet awakened his null bloodline. Even so, just looking at it made him recall the words of the Dark Null. Right now, your actions are like the tantrums of a spoiled child. Once you awaken the null bloodline, you'll realize how foolish you are. Weakest one. I wonder just what kind of power the null bloodline holds. It would no doubt be something dark and evil, Ryuk mused, feeling a slight distaste in his mouth as he looked at the dormant bloodline. Shaking off his disgusted expression, he turned to the ice core resting in the middle of both halves. His hand stretched out. His consciousness reached toward the core, and in the next instant, he faded into thin air. When Ryuk opened his eyes, he found himself in a world eternally covered in winter. Snow blanketed the land. Massive hills loomed in the distance. The ground itself was engraved with runic lines, their intricate patterns stretching far beyond sight. This was his apex realm. With a thought, Ryuk moved. In an instant, he appeared at the highest peak of the mountain. Sitting cross-legged, his figure blended seamlessly with the icy world. Then, in the next moment, powerful frost energy burst forth beneath his feet, spreading into the surrounding runes on the mountain. The entire peak lit up in a brilliant blue glow. At that moment, Ryuk looked like the very source of this energy. Now, let's fully flesh this out, and also implant the domain skill while at it. Ryuk mused to himself as he shut his eyes once more. His spiritual vision expanded. His physical body raised both hands skyward. And as the frost energy condensed around him, the very temperature of the realm plummeted. The mountaintop was instantly swallowed in a world of ice. The runic lines across the land burned brighter. The hills, the snow, the very air solidified even further, shifting into a reality phase. Silently, Ryuk continued, pushing through the core stage, into the peak stage, and finally, to perfection. The apex realm crystallized. And as it did, the power within it solidified into something even greater. What is this? The curious thought echoed through Isha's mind after wandering through the pet world for countless hours. She had desperately lost sight of Ryuk in the endless grassland, but eventually, she found something incredibly grand. It was none other than the two enormous, twin-sided trees before her. One side of the tree was covered in shimmering blue lights, invoking an aura of absolute reverence in Isha's heart. Instinctively, she lowered her head before it. But the second aura, it made her scales crawl. Her eyes turned crimson as an intense force of death and decay enveloped her. Yet, despite the overwhelming sensation, it didn't do much harm. She eventually snapped out of it. This gem, an ice gem? Isha mused to herself as she looked at the white-colored gem resting in the space between the twin trees. Elegant branches cradled it, and the gem shone with a bizarre, frosty light. From within, Isha could sense a monumental amount of power. Her heart trembled faintly as she stared at the object. It resembled her power, Involuntarily, her claw stretched toward it. The moment the gem touched her palm, her expression contorted in shock. The world around her distorted. And in the next instant, she disappeared. The pet world fell into solemn silence once more. Why? Why is it not working? Ryuk muttered under his breath as he stood atop the mountain. In a world where a crazy amount of snow rained down from the sky, the chill was incredibly biting, spreading among the icy hills. Even for Ryuk, the cold was unbearable. His breath seeped out in a frosty white mist with every passing second, and a slight layer of ice formed over his face, what should have been sweat instantly freezing upon exposure. Why do I keep failing? Ryuk clenched his teeth. He had done everything right. He had solidified the entire space until it could no longer be condensed. He had implanted the absolute zero domain skill to grant his domain its specialty. Yet, no matter how much he tried, Ryuk still felt blocked. He still wasn't able to fully control the Apex realm. It was as if there was one final missing piece, and no matter how much he struggled, he could never grasp it. Hey system, what am I missing? Ryuk asked as he finally opened his eyes. His head pounded from the headache, but he forced himself to rise, staring at the pitch-white world of snow beneath him. The long, runic lines remained on the floor, exuding a frosty white glow. They almost blended into the background of the icy world. Somehow, he felt they were the problem. Just what else do I have to do? Do these runic lines need to be filled with something? Do they say something? He waited for an answer. But unfortunately, this was one of those times when the system chose to remain silent. Probably because it had no idea either. Or, will this breakthrough be natural? Like moving from the initial stage to the core stage? Ryuk muttered under his breath. But he quickly dismissed that idea. No. Every major cultivation won't be natural. Not a cultivation as major as ascending from the plane of ascension to the plane of dominion. He ought to be able to manifest the apex realm into the outside world, to turn it into a domain, hence breaking through. But why? Why can't I manifest it yet? Why can't I control it? His snow-white hands clenched into fists. But before his frustration could consume him, he exhaled loudly, calming the infinite anger burning in his heart. Perhaps, I just need to give it more time. Ryuk mused to himself, preparing to withdraw his consciousness. But just as he was about to leave, his eyebrow raised. He suddenly felt a presence step into the apex realm. What's that? Ryuk's eyes widened in shock. He turned toward the far distance. And then, before he could react, he saw a figure gliding through the air. A figure that melded perfectly with the snow. A loud call echoed from afar. Ryuk! His jaw dropped. Is that Isha? His breath hitched as he stared at the ultra-gigantic creature before him. The sheer size. Isha had grown to nearly 100 meters in pure size. Her two wings alone stretched up to 150 meters in length. With every flap, the entire snowy area followed the rhythm of her wings, as if bowing to her very presence. Ryuk's body tensed. I've lost half of the control I had over the apex realm. His mind spun in shock. The snow. It should have been under his will, his command. But with Isha's appearance, his connection to them vanished. Everything was suddenly beyond his control. The faint connection he once had felt non-existent. Ryuk. Isha's voice echoed in his mind as she flew down from above. She dove onto the mountain Ryuk stood on, causing the ground to rumble slightly beneath her landing. Isha, what are you doing? How did you even get here? Ryuk asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and annoyance. Isha snickered. Just taking a usual stroll around my world. She shrugged. Then I found this white gem, touched it, and entered. Only to discover a part of my world that I didn't even know existed. Silly me. Ryuk clapped his hand to his forehead. Just taking a stroll? You keep getting better and better at lying with each passing day, Isha. He exhaled deeply. And that's worrying. Isha ignored his remark, her excitement bubbling over as she suddenly spread her wings and twirled in the air. Hey, Ryuk, can you see me? she asked eagerly. Ryuk rolled his eyes. Of course I see you. No, I mean look how big I am, Isha said, flapping her wings with newfound energy. Why am I suddenly so big? And what's this weird connection I feel with the world? It's like I can. Her words trailed off. Ryuk's jaw dropped. All around them, snow maelstrom began forming. The ice mountains shifted. The air currents intensified. Everything in the Apex realm, once under Ryuk's soul control, was suddenly moving on its own. Or rather, moving under Isha's command. Ryuk's heart pounded. Why do I feel such a strong connection to this world? Ryuk? Isha's voice echoed again, softer this time. She closed her eyes. The feeling, it was perfect. Absolute. Can you feel it too? Looking at the entire Apex realm unfurling into chaos, Ryuk could only stand there, numb, as he watched Isha gliding around with boisterous laughter. Can I feel it too? Actually, I ought to be the only one that feels it, Ryuk muttered to himself. But then his eyes flashed as he landed a loud slap on his face, the pain jolting him awake. No, I can't get jealous now. There's something, I can feel something. Ryuk mused as he looked at Isha forming hundreds of objects instantaneously from every snowflake in the air. Her power had momentarily increased, and his brain flashed with speed, processing thousands of hypotheses and discarding them just as quickly, until he came upon one that made his eyes widen in shock. That's it. It's Isha. Isha is the last formula to form my domain. Ryuk exclaimed loudly into the space as Isha turned, raising an eyebrow at him. That's it. It's Isha. The ice power is what formed the basis of all this. I got the ice power, then absorbed the ice apex energy, and then formed the ice apex core, which eventually evolved into the apex realm. All of these sources have been ice. But I forgot that I was never born to control ice. Ice was never really mine. It was Isha's. It was an inherent power from Isha. Isha owned the ice apex energy. Now that I'm trying to manifest my will onto the apex realm to make it form an apex domain. Only my will is not enough. I need Isha's will, the will of the true source of power. If only my will is used, the domain will be imperfect since the true source of it is no longer there. Isha is the source of the ice power. That explains why she suddenly feels so much control over the domain. That's why it easily bends to her will. It's because even though I have cultivated the ice apex energy from the start, it was Isha who was the true source of it. And now it needs her will. Isha owns the true source of the ice power, and I have built it to this level. But one of our wills alone isn't enough to form a domain. Isha won't be able to form the domain on her own because even though she's the source, she wasn't the one who built it. She will never achieve absolute control. But I alone wouldn't be able to manifest the domain fully either, even though I was the one who built it. Isha was the one who laid the groundwork for it. Only with our will together can we manifest it. But how? How do we merge our will together? Ryuk questioned himself as his brain worked quickly, his eyes scanning the apex realm, until they caught something. Wait, the runic lines. Ryuk muttered under his breath as he looked at the runic lines that seemed to stretch across the entire domain. His eyes flashed. I have been wondering what these runic lines were for and what they do. But now I know these runic lines form something. Ryuk stared in front of him, where the ground below Isha was floating, and realization dawned on him. Isha has suddenly grown so much when she arrived in her realm, and somehow, the runic lines extend all over the realm. It never occurred to me before that I needed to fill up these runic lines because they were so big. But what could I fill them up with? Perhaps, all of these runic lines could form one solid image of something. Ryuk mused. Isha, come. Come. Ryuk beckoned to Isha, who flapped over to him in an instant, appearing behind him. Fly up as high as you can, he stated. Immediately, Isha landed on an arc before exerting strength and instantly soaring into the sky. She soared for close to 3,000 meters into the endless space before finally coming to a stop, holding her position. From this perspective, The entire Apex realm seemed like a tiny pebble. Ryuk and Isha's eyes flashed as they finally saw the image that the runic lines formed on the ground. Is it me? Or does that thing form my image? Isha's voice rang in his head as a brilliant light flashed in Ryuk's eyes. It was the image of a frost wyvern lying on its belly. The claws, the wings, everything matched perfectly, and Ryuk's eyes widened. That's truly it. To manifest the domain, I need to fill up the runic lines. And right now, the runic lines are in the shape of Isha's body. This is it. Once Isha covers the runic lines completely, the final piece of the puzzle will be complete, and the domain will manifest itself. Ryuk mused before immediately turning to Isha, explaining everything to her. A domain, huh? Isha muttered at the end of it all. So all I have to do is fit my body into the shape of that runic line, right? Exactly, Ryuk stated. But, I'm not that big, am I? I mean, we're 3,000 meters above, and that's why it looked like it would fit me at all. If we get back down and compare to the runic line, I'm like a tiny pebble. How can I get that big? Isha asked, her brows furrowing. Ryuk whispered in her ear. Well, you didn't will yourself to be big before you became that size? Did you, Isha? No, I didn't, she replied. The realm listens to your will, does it not? It kinda does. Then what if you willed yourself to grow big? Really big with your will? Do you still doubt you can pull it off? Ryuk asked her. Isha's eyes widened in realization, and in the next instant, boom! The entire Apex realm quivered as if a mountain had slammed onto it. The slates of the runic lines on the ground began shining with an incredibly bright light. Isha soared downward with speed, leaving Ryuk standing in the air. But his eyes were fully on her figure as they flashed, discerning all of the hidden runes of the Apex realm brightening up. And quickly, Isha's form began widening and widening. Finally, it's happening! Just like Ryuk had guessed. The instant Isha landed on the ground, filling up the runic lines on the surface, all of her scales lit up with bright lights. Just as he had previously been a source of energy for the entire domain, silvery light emanated from Isha, flooding the runic lines in the area and rapidly spreading through the entirety of the domain. Ryuk watched as everything underwent a monumental transformation. Just like in the outside world, every single snowflake in the space began possessing a runic image, etchings dancing within them. The massively rushing snow slowly lost its speed, the countless snowflakes merging into each other as runic lines appeared on them. From within, Ryuk could sense a great deal of power as he floated down from the air. With every inch of his descent, he felt control returning to him. Previously, since Isha's entrance, he had felt himself losing half of his control over the domain. But now, he realized he could absolutely control it perfectly. Yet, it didn't seem like he was the only one growing into something else. As he touched Isha and looked into her opened eyes, he saw runic lines he had never seen before appearing within them, snowflakes dancing within the depths of her gaze. When Ryuk looked into her eyes, it was as if he was staring into a copy of his own Apex realm. And then, boom! A powerful pulse emanated from Isha, sending Ryuk's clothes flapping wildly as his eyes widened in shock. Isha's eyes had transformed into runic symbols. An aura of power rippled out from her as the runic lines on the ground disappeared. Isha rose back up, now bearing 2 extra wings, making the total number of wings on her a striking 4. Isha, you've broken through. Ryuk mused in shock, staring at Isha, who now radiated the same aura as a Cataclysm stage beast. There was no doubt about it, Isha had broken through. From a Grade B beast, she had now fully stepped into the realm of Grade A. A transformation that stunned Ryuk, but he was quickly pulled out of his thoughts as a notification appeared. Congratulations! The host has finally completed their domain. Congratulations! The host has reached the plane of dominion. The system's voice echoed in his mind, and Ryuk's eyes flashed with even more shock. He suddenly felt himself losing control of his right hand as it rose to his face. His middle finger rapped against his ring finger, and instantly he felt his consciousness magnify. His mind snapped back into his real body. He found himself among the trees, his hand raised in the same position, and a word instinctively formed on his lips. Domain expansion. Winter's solace. The instant those words were uttered, it was as if all of creation had been silenced into nothingness. The entire area fractured into pieces, reality itself seeming like an illusion. What was revealed was a snow-white endless plain with grim, surreal hills manifesting from thin air. Snowflakes rained from the sky, an aura of peace and tranquility flooding the entire world. A sensation of stillness settled over everything. The trees halted in their steps. Even rivers caught in the winterland stopped their motions, frozen in time. At the center of this transformation, standing on a high hill, was none other than Ryuk. Behind him stood a phantom, a dark yet ethereal figure, both of their eyes holding the symbol of runic lines. Ryuk felt his power multiply tenfold, his mana surging wildly, breaking through previous limits and rapidly magnifying endlessly until it finally came to a stop. He felt himself in complete control of his body once more. His gaze lowered to the snow-white world beneath him, a bit of surprise still lingering in his expression before it faded away. Looking at his hands, he slowly clenched them into fists. Winter's solace, huh? Ryuk mused with a chuckle, surprised by the name his domain had taken. And with his will, the domain suddenly disappeared into thin air, vanishing like a mirage. The only evidence of its existence was the fact that snow was now beginning to fall across the entire forest area. Ryuk, watching the falling snow, stretched his hand outward, feeling the coldness against his skin. This feels real, he muttered. But then he began to notice something, rustling among the trees. His eyes narrowed as he saw a flock of birds flying forth from the distance. The ground trembled, and the rush of movement became louder. What is happening? Ryuk wondered. But his question was answered almost instantly. Beasts suddenly appeared. And they weren't alone. First, they came in the hundreds, then the thousands, then the tens of thousands. All of them gathered around Ryuk. But this time, they held not the slightest bit of ferocity in their eyes. Ryuk looked at them and noticed something he had almost never seen in a beast before. Reverence. Yes, reverence and respect. He thought in shock as all of the birds gathered in the branches, all of the different forest creatures assembled around his body, their eyes flaming with the same emotion. Slowly, they all bent to the ground. The birds bowed their necks. The four-legged beasts fell to their stomachs. The serpentine creatures withdrew their tongues and lowered their heads. Every creature, even the fiercest among the beasts, bowed their heads as if recognizing him. And as they did, Ryuk's eyes flashed when another notification appeared. Congratulations! The host has achieved the first true awakening of their beast sovereign will. Beast sovereign will. Ryuk mused to himself, looking at the various bowing beasts. And that was when the truth dawned on him. I am the beast sovereign, the king of beasts. We pay our respect to the beast sovereign. The thoughts of the beasts suddenly echoed in Ryuk's head. It sounded like the roaring of thousands of creatures speaking as one. Ryuk looked in shock at each of them, realizing that he could understand their words, even the tiniest of them. Now I understand. I truly might have just begun achieving power now. Silence filled the air, the only sound being that of the falling snow and the cold wind meandering through the trees. Among the branches of one tree sat a lone figure, gazing at the ever-changing numbers in the sky. 249. These were the numbers that filled Ryuk's gaze as he stared up from the branch of the tree. He had successfully broken through to the initial stage of the Dominion Plane and had also completed his quest here. Now, there was nothing left for him to do other than wait. Just 2 minutes more. He mused to himself as the countdown continued. I don't know if I'll be sent back to the real world or transferred somewhere else. Ryuk thought under his breath as he stretched out his hand, a vial appearing in his palm. Going back is less likely. I have the vial to return in my hands. He mused, staring at it. Even though he could return to the place that held the teleporter, the same place he had entered from, and leave this realm, somehow Ryuk was reluctant to go. When I first arrived here, I had the strength level of the Plane of Dominion. Yet now, I've reached the strength level of the Plane of Cataclysm. That's almost an entire major jump in power in just a little over 6 months. Ryuk thought as he looked at the vial. If I had stayed in the academy, would I really have progressed this far? Living life slowly and comfortably, would I have grown this quickly? Now, I feel closer than ever to my goals, he murmured. And now there's this number counting down second by second. Higher chances are that this isn't the only trial. There will likely be another test the moment this countdown ends. That test may be harder or simpler. I'm not sure. But what I am sure of is that if I pull through it like I pulled through this one, my growth will skyrocket even more. If I return now back to Endearth, my progress will slow down considerably. I don't want that. Ryuk mused under his breath, looking longingly at the vial in his hands. It would be a lie to say he didn't want to go back. He had been here for about half a year now. Of course, he missed Endearth. There was almost no one he knew or was familiar with here. The loneliness was creeping in, the feeling of being truly alone in this vast jungle. Even though fear had long been eliminated, after all, he was the strongest here, there was still something missing. I miss you all. Old Jack, Morgaine, Mad White, Ryuk thought to himself as the countdown flashed red. 49. Only 49 seconds left. With a simple wave, Ryuk stored the vial back into his spatial ring. Rising calmly to his feet, he looked at the countdown. He had made his decision. He would not leave. He would face whatever was coming head-on, and reign over it in the end. When he finally returned, there would be no regrets left in him. 36, 29, 15. A deep exhale left Ryuk's lips as the countdown neared its end. The instant the countdown reached 0, the sky fractured, splitting apart from a single point at its center. The cracks spread like lightning before the pieces faded into thin air, revealing a swirling vortex in the sky, radiating an intense aura of darkness. Ryuk didn't even need to think. He could feel a powerful force wrapping around him, lifting him from the tree. But he didn't resist. He allowed himself to be pulled in, moving toward the portal. The more he let go, the stronger the dragging force became, pulling him deeper and faster. Within moments, he disappeared into the portal, and the cracks in the sky began mending themselves, the blue hue returning as though nothing had happened. The beasts, once disturbed by the disturbance, resumed their daily lives, easily forgetting the event that had just transpired. You have completed the first trial, Beastly Plane Dominion. A deep, ancient voice echoed through the milky white void Ryuk found himself in moments later. And then the voice rang out again. Well done. You have become eligible to move on to the second phase of the test. Just like I guessed. Ryuk thought to himself as the white expanse around him suddenly vanished, replaced by pitch-black darkness. Then, the voice spoke once more. Phase 2 will now begin. Trial 1, Forsaken Chain. Dark. Pitch darkness. It was all Ryuk could see, all he could feel. His senses gone. Then suddenly, a loud gasp tore through the void as a pair of crimson-blue eyes snapped open, scanning the darkness. But all he could see was nothing. Immediately, Ryuk tried to connect to something, someone, only to be met with silence. Isha! Isha! Silence! Isha! Ryuk called out loudly in his mind, eventually forcing the words out into the darkness. But no response came. And what was even more horrifying, "Hey, system, you there?" he asked. Nothing. No reply. A chilling emptiness crept in as Ryuk stretched out his hands, trying to release ice, to summon even a flicker of light. But nothing came. This feeling, he thought, staring at his hands, but seeing only blackness. It's like I've been reduced to a mortal state. Right now, he felt weak. Just like when he had first started hunting grade F beasts. But if that was shocking, what he couldn't wrap his mind around was this sensation, the feeling of falling. He realized as he instinctively looked down. He was still falling. Falling deeper, and deeper, and deeper. It was as if he had been cast into an endless abyss. Nothing around him, only the weightlessness of descent, and the eternal void waiting below. Dark, pitch darkness, a sense of loss. Just how long have I been falling? Ryuk couldn't tell. Seconds? Minutes? Hours? Days? Months? Years? Time was slipping through his fingers, stretching and twisting like dying embers in the wind. He reached out, but there was nothing. No ground, no walls, no sky. Only the abyss, seemingly swallowing him whole. But one thing kept him anchored, grounding him to reality, his heartbeat. A steady thump that grew weaker with each passing moment. The cold wasn't just physical. It gnawed at something deeper, something beyond flesh. Like the kind of cold that seeps into the cracks of the soul and hollows it out from within. And what was worse? The silence. It was maddening. Not the quiet of solitude he had felt in the forest, but the absence of his own existence itself. Even his own breathing refused to echo in it. But just when his consciousness began fading, devoured continuously by the abyss, he sighted something, a flicker, a sensation at the edge of his mind. And immediately, he awakened, realizing a truth he wasn't sure whether to be happy or sad about. I'm not alone. His thoughts betrayed him, but he had no time to dwell on them. Then, the wailing began. A single voice, broken, hollow. A scream so raw it scraped against his soul. Yet somehow, it ignited a flame within his dying heart. His heartbeat instantly sped up, his hair standing on end. But then, another, just as bone-chilling as the first, if not worse. Then another, and another. The chorus of agony grew, twisting through the vast emptiness and gnawing into his soul like claws. The screams weren't distant. They were everywhere. Inside his ears, inside his skull, inside his very being, retching through his soul. He gasped, but his breath came out hacked and wrong, as if the abyss was trying to steal it away from him. His hand clawed at his hair, but then he stopped. The abyss had brightened up a bit. He focused his dazed mind and legs, but that wasn't the only thing. He saw them, the chained bodies, suspended in the void, entangled in rusted, monstrous chains that dug deep into their flesh. They weren't just hundreds, thousands. And as Ryuk soared onward, more. Now he could see it. He was falling through an abyssal pit, and adorning its circular walls were these unnatural forms. Limbs contorted, eyes turned into hollow pustules of decay. They did not move. They did not struggle. But their mouths hung open in eternal wails, carved from their throats in an agony that would seemingly never end. Some were whole, their faces frozen in the moment of their final scream. Others were mangled beyond recognition, limbs missing, skin peeled back in strips, their flesh weeping a darkness thicker than blood. One of the bodies caught Ryuk's attention, a wail louder than most, a human woman. Her body hung, her hair floating weightlessly, her face twisted in something that was neither life nor death. Her lips trembled as if she was about to speak to him, to beg him, to warn him, or to curse him. But the chain around her throat tightened, dragging her deeper into the abyss's walls. And then, they all turned, not their heads, their entire bodies, twisting, turning, bending in impossible ways. They all turned their faces to Ryuk. A wave of cold so absolute crashed over Ryuk that his mind almost snapped. His pulse hammered within him, his vision blurring. His very soul recoiled from the sheer wrongness of what he was witnessing. An ominous feeling of danger, whose mere presence whispered death itself. Then, the chains moved, like awakening serpents. They slithered, rattling with a sound that ripped through reality itself. Rusted iron, slick with something darker than blood. Like writhing roots they shot downward, chasing toward him. The horrific creatures had been freed from their shackles. And now, The chains that held them were flying toward him with terrifying speed. From above, like an avalanche, they surged for Ryuk. And he moved, barely, swiftly shifting his weight, dodging them. But the true horror came when they reached for his neck, his wrists, and his ankles. The creatures, now freed from their silence, fell toward him, their decayed hands outstretched, seeking his body. And then, realization dawned upon Ryuk. He looked into their wailing faces, and beneath their expressions of agony, he finally saw what lurked beneath, a mask of intense stillness and unchanging emptiness. They don't just seek to bind me. Ryuk's eyes widened in horror as the creatures closed in. He could finally see beyond their twisted, screaming faces. Beneath those wailing mouths was another face, a second face, one carved with only sinisterness and maddening desire. They want to make me one of them. Today, after countless years in the abyss, the Forsaken Chains had finally found their next victim. "Go away!" Ryuk roared, his voice filled with disgust and rage as his fist slammed into the face of a creature. His hand pierced through like a knife through butter. Rotten brain matter splattered as the creature released its final gasp, granting Ryuk a breath of space. And he inhaled deeply. "I might have lost all my abilities, but I still have my physical strength." Ryuk's eyes shined with sudden realization. But as he looked, they were still coming. More and more, soaring after him, their grotesque figures twisting and writhing as they hunted him. He knew he had to act. Now, immediately, Ryuk moved. Throwing down his arms, he folded his body inward, tucking himself into a natural point before suddenly, he expanded. His body snapped outward with force, and instantly, the hands that were holding onto him were ripped from their owners. Detached from their sockets, they spiraled into the abyss, severed. And then, boom! A shockwave exploded outward from Ryuk's heavy clap, the resultant force pushing the creatures above him higher into the abyss, while he himself shot downward at terrifying speed. But still, they kept soaring after him. Ryuk's eyes flashed with sharp light. "They'll catch up again soon, and my head is starting to blur from this unending fall. I need to get them off my turf," he mused, his gaze locking onto the creatures plummeting down just like him, bound by the same force. Then his eyes widened. "That's it. Gravity," he said aloud, glancing at the creatures above. Spreading his body wide, he somehow slowed his descent just as the creatures caught up, their devil-forsaken claws reaching for him. In that instant, Ryuk inched closer to the wall of the abyss and, boom! He smashed his legs against the abyss wall, reducing an unlucky chained one into pulp before soaring with incredible speed toward the opposite wall. The entire abyss quaked as Ryuk slammed into it, his blood tumbling within him, but he ignored the pain. A grin spread across his face as he looked at the chained ones who continued plummeting into the abyss, soon disappearing from sight. "We're all being pulled by gravity, slaves to it in this space. And if there's one thing about these creatures, it's that they're slow in the head. They won't react fast enough if I cling to the wall while we keep falling. That should get them off my back," Ryuk analyzed. But then, the grotesque sounds of squelching and groaning reached his ears. The creatures around the wall, once locked in chains, began breaking free. With narrowed eyes, Ryuk watched as they crawled toward him from all directions like monstrous spiders. TCH. He had managed to shake off the ones above. But what about those waiting by the side and below? "They're all crawling toward me," he muttered. From below, dark shapes flashed toward him. A sickening slash rang out as a creature's horrific claws tore through the air. Ryuk punched forward, but then, a sudden, wailing scream erupted. Blood gushed from Ryuk's nose and ears as his fist pierced only air. Then, Ryuk barely jerked his head aside at the last second, but it wasn't enough. A claw slashed across his cheek, tearing open a hole in his jaw. His face twisted in agony. "They're claws. They can cleave through my bones," Ryuk gasped. Yet he had no time to think. 3 more claws lashed toward him. He tried to climb higher up the wall to evade. Another wail shook the abyss. Ryuk's movements froze. Even more blood shot from his ears and nose. A strangled groan escaped his lips as he felt sharp agony rip through his arms and back. Their screams, they disorient me. Without hesitation, Ryuk made his decision. He jumped off the wall, resuming his descent into the abyss. If I cling to the wall, they'll overwhelm me and rip me to nothing. I have to keep going down. But then his eyes flashed as he noticed something. The creatures below the abyss walls had already broken free from their chains. And in the next instant, they leapt toward him. From below, their claws reached. From above, they crawled down, blocking his view. From the sides, they lunged, claws gleaming with wicked hunger. I'm trapped. Damn it, Ryuk growled. He watched as the creature's mouth stretched open wide, then quickly curled himself into a tight ball, twisting his bones unnaturally to shield his vital organs. Just as he expected, a thunderous scream rang through the abyss, deafening beyond comprehension. And since Ryuk was caught at the center of it, the pain was unbearable. A chilling, gut-wrenching scream tore from Ryuk's throat. 40% of his body was ripped apart. Blood rained down in torrents, drenching the frenzied chained ones, who only seemed to grow more manic. Ryuk's eyes widened as he watched himself being ripped apart into nothing. His defensive stance wasn't working. If this kept up, it was only a matter of time before his important organs were gone. He had to fight. Through the haze of pain, he lashed out, tearing bodies apart with his fists and kicks. He reached for one of the creature's claws, yanking it out amidst the bloodbath, and wielded it as a weapon. Ryuk roared, his body giving in to the final, desperate struggle. With the ripped-out claw in hand, he tore through the blockade in front of him. Claw clashed against claw. When his strength failed, he bit into them, cracking their skulls with his broken jaw. His eyes burned crimson. The battlefield was pure carnage. Red blood mixed with dark blood. Organs splattered across the abyss walls. Then, a crazed, evil cackle echoed through the abyss. Ryuk's jaw widened unnaturally, stretching all the way to his ears without him realizing it. With black-stained teeth, he devoured his enemies. Anything that came within his grasp, he snapped apart. Arms were ripped out and wielded as weapons used to tear through more bodies. His mind screamed, "Survive! All I need to do is survive. To kill long enough to survive." Their claws came from everywhere. There was no way he could avoid it all. The only choice he had now was to survive in the only way he knew. And to Ryuk, that was battle. The creatures grew frantic at the sight of red blood, unlocking their chains even faster as they rapidly chased after Ryuk. They slashed and slashed, ripping apart chunks of skin with their ghostly dark claws, yet they were also sliced to nothing by the rampaging Ryuk. This was a battle between two groups of creatures. One had completely lost their sense of pain, now driven solely by their primal thirst for blood, and the other had been assaulted with so much pain that their body had turned off its pain sensors, leaving nothing but pure will for survival. Blood and body parts sprayed all over the abyss as both groups soared downward at incredible speed before. A heavy crash, and then silence. The sound that followed was that of bones being shattered to pieces as Ryuk landed heavily on the ground. Blood rushed out from his lips. Ah! Ah! Layered breaths escaped his lips as he struggled to keep his heart beating, trying not to be completely drowned by the pain that seared not just his body but his very soul. Right now, there were various missing parts on him. Severed legs, severed hands, a ripped open jaw, exposed ribs. There was almost no difference between him and an eaten animal, except he was alive and still struggling to live. I have to move to know where I am, Ryuk thought, urgency laced in his voice. He had finally stopped falling and landed somewhere, but in his battered state he couldn't see where he was. And with danger lurking in every corner until now, he knew he needed to stand up. Isha! Isha! System! Ryuk called out, seeking help, but he got no reply. If he still had the system, he could buy some rejuvenating pills and get back on his feet, even if not fully. And if Isha was here, he could ask her to scout the surroundings. But neither of them answered his calls. It was like they had been completely severed from him, leaving him with nothing but his physical strength, which had now been drained. After moments of breathing and forcing himself to rise, his body's natural regeneration kicked in. Slowly, he regained some sensation, and with gritted teeth, he pressed his reformed hand against the ground, pushing himself up onto one knee. But the sight before him made his already thumping heart pound wildly in his chest. Where the hell am I? Ryuk asked in horror as something beneath his grasp shattered into pieces. He hurriedly retreated, only for the sound of crushing bones to echo even louder in the dead silent area. The world before him was a world of bones. They crumbled beneath his weight, brittle remains of the dead collapsing into dust at his touch. His hurried motion to brace himself sent a wave of splintered ribs and skulls scattering outward, rattling like wind chimes in a breeze that did not even exist. Yet, despite the stillness, the air was suffocating. No movement, no sound, only a strange sensation that overwhelmed his senses. The sensation of being watched. The thought echoed in Ryuk's head, and his spine chilled when his instincts tracked down the source of that feeling. Ryuk lifted his gaze and saw the sky. No, not a sky, a void of eyes. Not stars, not darkness, not even a true sky. Eyes, countless, shifting, blinking, closing in unnatural rhythms. Some were small, some impossibly large, some bloodshot, others featureless voids. Watching him, always watching, observing his every move. Right now, they were watching how his heart pounded in his chest, rising and falling in terror. Ryuk's breath unconsciously hitched, his entire body enveloped in overwhelming horror. His breathing slowed, controlled by instinct, and his limbs froze. This power was beyond him. It was like his cultivation, his strength, his will, none of it mattered. It was like staring into the eyes of an ancient horror. Yet he knew he needed to move. He pushed himself up from his knees, every nerve in his body screaming in protest. Blood trickled down his arms, staining the layers of bone beneath him. And that was when the horror began. The second Ryuk's drop of blood landed on a skull's forehead. The sound of clattering bones erupted, and Ryuk's breath hitched in shock. With widened eyes, he watched as the bones rapidly aligned. Skulls, limbs, spines, all mending together at an unnatural speed. They gathered, fused, and in mere seconds, they formed a creature that made Ryuk's heart shrivel within him. A 3-meter-tall humanoid creature stood a full meter above Ryuk. Its body was covered in an eerie layer of external bones, forming an armor of pure white ridges. Ghostly green flames burned where its eyes should have been, and cryptic green tattoos shimmered over its forehead. Then, from the distance, a deep noise echoed, a heavy object flying forth. And as Ryuk watched, the object, a weapon, landed in the creature's grasp. A gigantic club, massive in size, its end covered in thick, brutal spikes. A nauseating aura of death emanated from the bone-crushing weapon. Ryuk barely had time to react before the creature turned its burning gaze toward him and raised the club above his head. Then, boom, the ground shattered into pieces. The monstrous skeleton smashed its club into the earth where Ryuk had just been, the floor disintegrating into nothingness, bones exploding from the impact. To the side, the sound of rattling bones rang out. A figure rolled across the skeletal remains, crashing onto the ground. It was none other than Ryuk, who had barely dodged the strike. He tried to rise, but the moment he put weight on one leg, it gave out, sending him collapsing onto his knees. Blood splashed from Ryuk's lips as he felt an unhealed wound tear open once more. And immediately, the splattered blood landed on another pile of bones. Ryuk's eyes widened in horror as he began to hear more clattering. Bones shifting, moving, awakening. One by one they began to rise. 7, 7 more of the 3-meter-tall creatures stood before him, all gripping massive clubs. If my blood splashes on them, they'll wake up. Ryuk's mind reeled in shock. Unconsciously, his eyes darted around, taking in his surroundings. Thousands of such bones were scattered across the entire landscape. The horror of what would happen if all of them awakened at once sent a deep chill through Ryuk's bones. For a moment, he regretted having any blood left to spill. But there was no time to dwell on it. Right now, 8 skeletal warriors stood before him. 8 deadly clubs gripped tightly in their hands. And 8 pairs of ghostly green flames were set on a single goal, ripping his life away. One of my legs has been ripped apart. I can't move it very well, so I'm slower than normal. But my hands have healed. My left eye is blurry, distorting the image around me. Keeping it open might be dangerous, but my right eye is still good. I can't run around much, so I need them to come closer. But still, they're all made of bones. How do I handle them? They have no heart or anything. I guess I'll just have to figure that out soon. Ryuk mused to himself as he watched the skeletons turn their glowing green eyes toward him. Then, all at once, they rushed forward. A deep inhale echoed from Ryuk's lungs as he closed both eyes. Slowly, he pressed his leg firmly against the ground, keeping his arms close to his sides, his posture sharp like a blade. Feeling the rumbling of bones beneath his feet, a loud breath escaped his lips as he felt the pain in his limbs subside, diverting his focus toward the sounds around him. Here it comes, Ryuk thought as he suddenly stepped to the side, his body following the motion, and then, boom! The ground of bones beneath his feet trembled violently. Ryuk's right eye snapped open, locking onto a club that had just smashed into the spot he had occupied moments ago. The skeleton's green eyes turned toward him, but all it saw was Ryuk's outstretched arm, slicing through the air like a blade. The sound of bones shattering echoed as Ryuk's fingertips tore through the forehead of the skeleton warrior, spreading cracks across its skull before. Boom! An explosion burst outward as Ryuk jerked his hand back, sending the skeleton's entire body hurtling backward. The skull split into nothingness. One down, Ryuk thought as he swiftly raised his arms to shield his face, ducking just in time. The air was violently torn apart as a massive club passed over his head. Boom! Instantly following, Ryuk took 3 quick steps backward as another club crashed into the ground, an inch from his foot. But he reacted immediately. His leg shot out, smashing into the skeleton warrior's chest and sending it flying backward. 2 more heavy slams resounded as Ryuk dodged a strike to his head and another aimed at his chest. Crouching low, he sprinted forward, escaping the circle of surrounding skeletons, instantly appearing before the one he had just knocked back. The skeleton regained its balance and immediately swung its massive club downward. Ryuk dodged, a thin line of blood appearing on his cheek from the sharp wind pressure of the attack. But he saw his opportunity. His arm jerked backward before tearing forward at lightning speed. The skull cracked as the force sent the skeleton flying, its head smashing onto the bony ground and shattering into pieces. A ghostly green aura seeped from its body as it fell still. 2 down. But then, the air whistled behind him. Reacting instantly, Ryuk stomped the ground, sending the fallen skeleton's club flying into the air. He snatched it mid-flight and swung it behind him without even looking. Boom! The clash of bones rang out as the 2 clubs smashed against each other. The impact shattered both weapons, but the force tore open Ryuk's palm, sending blood spraying. Ryuk roared, clenching his teeth through the mind-numbing pain. He twisted his body and leaped into the air, using the momentum to attack. The sickening sound of bones cracking resonated as Ryuk's knee smashed into the lower jaw of a skeleton warrior, sending its skull splintering apart. But, as he landed, a sharp pain shot through his leg. His own knee had shattered on impact. Blood nearly spilled from his lips, but he swallowed it back down, forcing himself to stay focused. His eye locked onto the remaining skeleton warriors. Just 5 more. My knee is useless and so is my right leg. I only have one leg left that's still functional. My right arm is torn, I can't hold anything with it, but I still have my left hand. The skeletons advanced, their green eyes locked onto him. Ryuk didn't move. One of them attacked first, its massive club swinging toward him. Ryuk's elbow shot upward, colliding with the skeleton's arm. Two distinct cracks echoed. One belonged to the skeleton's elbow, which was forced out of its joint. The other was Ryuk's own shoulder, crushed from the force. The skeleton's club slammed into the ground, and immediately, Ryuk snatched it with his remaining hand. Without hesitation, he swung the club with all his strength, smashing it into the skeleton's skull and blowing it to shards. Boom! A sharp pain shot through Ryuk's body as his loose-hanging right arm was ripped from his shoulder by a crushing blow. The pain was overwhelming, but through it Ryuk saw an opening. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself up onto his knee and swung his club with all his remaining strength. The attack connected. The skeleton's head was sent flying into the distance. Three more, and I win, Ryuk growled, dragging himself up. His burning gaze locked onto the three remaining skeletons, who all raised their clubs high. Dodge? Dodge? The thought pounded in his head. But then he bit down on his lip, ignoring the clubs descending upon him. With the last of his strength, Ryuk swung his club horizontally in a desperate final strike. Three explosive impacts rang through the battlefield. Then, three bodies collapsed onto the ground. Two of them were skeletal warriors, their heads missing, their eerie green glow fading into nothingness. The third body, however, lay sprawled out on the ground, unmoving, more lifeless than the corpses around him. And the one still standing wasn't Ryuk. One more. Just one more. Ah! The sound of heavy breathing and insane murmurs resonated through the bony graveyards where the battered body lay. Right now, Ryuk's state was absolutely mind-chilling. Half of his entire body, up until his waist, had fallen by his side, almost as if he had been severed cleanly by a blade. But it was far worse. Ryuk had truly been severed, not by a smooth blade, but by a rough, merciless club. One of his legs lay deformed beyond recognition, barely functioning, and his hands, his very bones, had been completely ripped out, rendering them useless. I need to get up, Ryuk stated, his light flashing with anger. Yet beneath it, a hint of horror as he looked at his broken form. And then, he saw it. A figure was walking toward him, step by step. The sound of heavy footsteps thudding against the bones and something being dragged along the ground echoed ominously. It came from none other than the skeletal figure. Slowly, it walked toward Ryuk, dragging behind it a massive club, shattering bones in its path. Get up! Get up! Ryuk screamed inside his head, watching in horror as the skeletal figure raised its hefty club high above its head. Isha? System? Ryuk wanted to roar out, but all he could do was gurgle as blood clogged his throat. And then, as he locked eyes with the ghostly green glow of the skeletal figure, he saw death. Pure, malevolent death. He was now alone with this force, perhaps the most malevolent force in the world. And there was nothing, absolutely nothing, that could stop it from ripping away his life. No, I'll fight back. Ryuk roared in defiance, his crimson gaze bursting forth from his eyes. Immediately, he focused all of his remaining strength into the only part of his body he could still move, his last remaining leg. With sheer desperation, Ryuk jerked his leg, kicking the skeletal figure with every ounce of force he had left. The undead collapsed instantly onto the ground, but its club followed after it. The massive weapon slammed into Ryuk's neck, and blood sprayed like a fountain. But Ryuk ignored the pain. His mouth widened to its absolute limit, and then, he bit down, hard, straight into the skull of the skeletal figure, his eyes flashing with an ominous crimson light. An enraged wail left the skeletal figure's maw, but Ryuk paid it no attention. He bit and bit and bit until finally, the sound of shattering echoed through the graveyard. The skeletal figure's skull exploded into pieces under Ryuk's sheer will. Green gas seeped out of its body as it crumbled into nothing but ashes. And then, Ryuk's head collapsed onto the ground. Ah! He tried to breathe, but it was as if something was restricting him. He had lost feeling in everything. Everything. But I lived. Ryuk mused to himself. But then his gaze slowly dimmed. He looked up at the countless eyes in the sky, eyes that stared blankly back at him. Horror flickered in his pupils. And then a deep calm, a slow relaxation dawned on Ryuk. I'm dying. His regeneration, it was no longer working. He was not healing. And my heart, it's been destroyed. Ryuk forced his last remaining strength to his chest, trembling fingers pressing against his body. And then he saw it. Blood was spurting from his side. And where his heart should have been, there was nothing, a gaping, agonizing hole. Remember, Ryuk, you can always abandon your body in times of need. The only thing you need to survive is your heart, lungs, and brain. As long as they aren't harmed, you have a chance of living. Uncle Bob's words echoed in his head as Ryuk's trembling hand collapsed onto the bone-ridden ground. I failed, Uncle Bob. My heart is gone. Ryuk mused to himself. Moments stretched into eternity. Hundreds of years seemed to pass as Ryuk stared at the black, blank eyes in the sky. His death was so close. He could feel it. The air around him grew heavier and heavier. His very life force was slipping away. Perhaps I should have left for the academy instead of taking this path. Was it greed? Blood flowed faster from his lips. I just wanted to grow stronger. Is that greedy of me? No. My decision could only be right. Too many people have died for me. Too many lives have been sacrificed to keep the Draconis alive. Ryuk thought, watching as the countless eyes in the sky slowly shut. Then what? What can I blame my death on? Ryuk mused. And then, a chuckle escaped his lips, blood rushing from his throat. It doesn't matter now, does it? All I regret is never getting revenge for you, Uncle Bob. That's all I regret. Ryuk mused, his final thoughts drifting into the abyss. And finally, the entire world darkened. He took his last breath. Ah, how interesting. A voice suddenly resonated through the darkness. Really, really interesting. The voice echoed once more. And then, a sharp gasp tore through the air as two eyes snapped open. And suddenly, the sensations came rushing back. The sound of blades clashing, of screams, of roars of cultivators filled the world. When Ryuk opened his eyes, he was faced with the sight of an unending battlefield. Warriors fought to the bloody death, blood slithering through the land like a great anaconda. But then, something else stole Ryuk's attention. In the middle of the battlefield, standing atop a high-rise throne, amidst the swimming bodies of beasts and warriors alike, the figure stood. Ryuk's heart thundered in his chest. And to make matters worse, it was staring directly at him. Congratulations on passing the second level of the test. Welcome to Phase 3 of the test. A goal has been assigned. Goal. You have arrived in the land of unending war with full consciousness. Defeat the warlock of eternal war. The sky was red, a color like that of blood. The ground was cracked, and fissures spewed with the blood of the people who had fought and fallen. But Ryuk's eyes narrowed when he noticed a peculiar anomaly amidst the war raging around him. They're not dying. He watched as an army struck each other down. Some split in the head, some cleaved completely in two. Yet still they moved, still fighting despite their life-threatening injuries. Even those who had been reduced to nothing more than a bloody mess on the floor were still squirming, undoubtedly alive. That was when he realized a heart-thumping truth. So, people here can't die? If that's the case, could it mean they're all locked in this war forever? He mused, his gaze shifting back to the battlefield, wondering just how long this endless slaughter had been raging. A sharp sound suddenly tore through the chaos, drawing Ryuk's attention forward. His gaze settled on the most prominent figure on this battlefield. A mountain of defeated warriors and beasts lay piled up, and seated atop a throne crafted from their bones, adorned with their skulls, was the individual responsible. A massive humanoid being, teetering on the line between human and monster. An exceptionally bulky warrior with enormous arms, thick veins squirming beneath his skin, revealing his horrifying strength. His eyes were pitch black and his body was clad in bone-like armor, covered in dark runic lines. His long dark hair framing a face riddled with bloody scars. What caught Ryuk's attention the most, however, was the enormous weapon embedded into the bones beneath him, resting beside the throne. A massive blade. It resembled a knife, but it was nearly 2 meters in length, with an extra grip positioned at its middle. The sound of creaking suddenly resonated through the entire battlefield, drowning out even the loudest clashes of battle. Immediately, all fighting ceased, and every warrior froze in place, caught in the midst of their motions. Something began to shatter, none other than the throne of bones upon which the colossal figure sat. Slowly, he rose to his feet, and as he stood upright, all the still-standing warriors also straightened, aligning themselves like an army. And then, the massive, heavy blade was pulled from the ground by the monstrous figure. He lifted it with veins bulging powerfully, making Ryuk wonder just how heavy it truly was. Then, slowly, the figure raised the blade and pointed it directly at Ryuk. A runic circle appeared in his eyes. Challenge issued for the third phase of the test. Defeat the spawn of the eternal Lord of War. The voice echoed throughout the world, and Ryuk's brows furrowed as he looked at the figure before him. Defeat him? How am I supposed to defeat him when? His thoughts halted as his eyes widened in realization. He instinctively called for his ice abilities, but there was no response. It was as if his mana had been completely sealed. His gaze flickered downward, taking in his own hands and legs. With a simple will, Ryuk's body began shifting rapidly. Soon, a veil of nanobots covered his body, and in his right hand, a massive, nightmarish scythe materialized. The air around Ryuk was sliced apart as the scythe spun within his grip before settling into his grasp. A relieved smile spread across his face. Finally, I can use my nanobody ability again. Activate Nano Abyssal Reaper. Boom! The ground trembled violently as Ryuk snapped his gaze forward. The colossal warrior had leapt from his throne, descending from the towering heap of corpses. He crouched low upon landing before. His body shot forward at a speed faster than lightning. Ryuk barely had time to react before he saw the enormous, terrifying length of the warrior's blade rushing toward him. Its edge mere inches from his head before he could even twitch a muscle. Boom! The sound of something tearing through flesh echoed as he instinctively stepped aside, but he was too slow for the sneak attack. The blade landed on his shoulder, cleaving it off entirely. You're mine now! The scythe in Ryuk's grip flashed downward with blinding speed. Ignoring the loss of his arm, he swung toward the thick neck of the Titan, who, for once, seemed unable to dodge fast enough. But then, boom! The instant the scythe's edge touched the Titan's neck, Ryuk expected a clean decapitation. But instead, it was like striking a mountain. The impact sent him flying backward, his scythe still in his grip, bouncing against the ground multiple times before coming to a stop. Shock filled his eyes. As he looked up, all he saw was a thin, white line across the Titan's neck, already fading. Impossible! My Nano Abyssal Reaper didn't cleave through. Ryuk's heart pounded in disbelief. He knew his scythe had sliced through even A-grade beasts with ease before. Yet, this figure before him hadn't even spilled a drop of blood. But then, the sound of bodies collapsing suddenly echoed across the battlefield. Ryuk turned his gaze, eyes widening as he saw 70 undead warriors suddenly dropping to the ground, motionless, their necks cleanly severed from their heads. Realization dawned. No, my scythe did have an effect on him. But he negated it. He passed the damage of my attack onto those 70 warriors behind him, ensuring they took the brunt of it while he remained completely unscathed. Ryuk mused to himself, eyes narrowing coldly. The sound of the ground cracking beneath massive footsteps rang out as the monstrous figure slowly walked forward, one step at a time, his heavy blade dragging behind him. Ryuk's eyes flickered with understanding, and in an instant he dismissed his scythe. The Titan, mid-stride, paused for 3 whole seconds, as if surprised by the action. Then he resumed his approach. Ryuk's gaze sharpened. Ryuk mused to himself as he looked at the ethereal-like figure walking toward him and the thousands of warriors behind him. The spawn of the Warlock of War, huh? Now I understand. Ryuk muttered as he looked around the place. This place is a carefully laid-out domain, and the one who set it up is none other than the spawn of the eternal Warlock of War. A domain where all the people he has killed will continue an everlasting fight against each other. This fight, I can sense it produces a wild energy, which, I can guess, the spawn of the Warlock of War feeds on himself. Ryuk mused, as his brain rapidly pieced the secrets together. When I slashed his neck, my blade should have cleaved through, but the attack instead passed onto the necks of his warriors, and there are about 7,000 warriors here. Before I can make a mark on him, I would need to cut him down with my blade about 100 times or so, before his warriors are exhausted and a mark is finally made on him. I would normally be up for this challenge, but it's something hard to achieve, because of that hefty blade. Ryuk muttered as he turned his attention to the Titan's huge blade, which was being raised toward him. That blade holds the same power as my scythe. Its ability to erase anything out of existence. Ryuk mused, and then he turned to look at his arms. Even though the veil currently covering him ought to be able to instantly adapt to almost all attacks, Ryuk could see that his cleaved-off hands weren't repairing themselves. It wasn't regenerating at all. Even though the nanobodies were all over the area, rippling and seemingly trying to fix the injury, as soon as they came in contact, they were all erased into nothing. They were trying to regenerate, trying to adapt, but all of their regeneration and persistence were being erased out of existence. No matter how much they tried, they couldn't adapt to being erased, so it was a useless endeavor. Just 5 more cuts from that blade, and I would lose all of my body and be killed. If I choose to fight, then I have to place a bet. Striking him 100 times and bringing death to him on the 101st try before he could make 5 marks on me. That's a foolish bet. I won't be winning. Ryuk mused to himself. His previous self might have felt excited from this, but Ryuk knew well that this was his life on the line. He had been seconds away from losing it just now. He wouldn't choose to gamble it away so soon. Also, Ryuk said with a smirk. In the next instant, the Titan arrived about 10 meters away, the ground beneath its feet cracking as it seemed about to take off. But it suddenly stopped. It watched as Ryuk dipped his hand into his own chest. Bjorst! Blood spurted out like a tap as Ryuk's own hand tore into his heart, ripping through from the other side. Slowly, he pulled his hand back, blood pouring from his lips. Yet, as he looked at his own bloody hand, even though there was a hole in his chest, there was no heart inside. This isn't my real body. This is like my spirit body, just like when I appeared before those 2 Ryuks. I have a spirit body. My real body is probably still in that graveyard of bones. This test is one taken after a person has lost their own body. Now I understand. That graveyard of bones is the first step. After I have lost my body, I will be transferred to this place, which is the domain of the spawn of the eternal Warlock of War. In this place, I will be fighting, not with my body, but with my spirit. After I get defeated by the Warlock of War, I would then have lost myself. My real body will become nothing but bones in the graveyard, just like those thousands of bones in the graveyard, and my spirit will remain here fighting eternally, just like these 7,000 war spirit warriors. Now I'm confused. Is this even a trial? Or a death sentence? Hee hee heh. Ryuk laughed out loud like a madman under the gaze of the Titan, who looked at him with furrowed brows before taking a step forward, only to stop again. It watched as Ryuk flashed it a mad smile. Spawn of the eternal Warlock of War. Now, I would say you really have defeated quite the number of people. 7,000 warriors. all having their wills broken before you. What chance would I even have if I engage in a physical battle with you? Ryuk mused, grinning. It was obvious to him. This devil before him was a true horror. The vast pit of bones that Ryuk had seen before had been caused by this man, and the 7,000 warriors before him meant that he had defeated each and every one of them, turning them into his war slaves. He had essentially killed about 7,000 individuals in spirit. What could he, Ryuk, use to fight him that this man hadn't already seen? This was a warrior who had killed thousands upon thousands. How could he, Ryuk, outmatch him with mere tactics or intelligence? Fighting this creature was suicide, and Ryuk figured that out quickly. If so, then there was no need to fight. In fact, fighting was too much of a gamble, one he would undoubtedly lose. The only thing he could do was stake an even larger gamble. Slowly, Ryuk raised his bloody finger upward, folding it as if preparing to flick a stone. But he held the finger down as his lips slowly moved. "Activate Anunnaki Oblivion," Ryuk whispered. The creature instantly shot forward toward him, leaping high into the air as its gigantic blade flashed down with force toward his head. Ryuk's lips parted as he began laughing like a madman. "Let's gamble," he whispered as a small dark ball of light appeared in the middle of his curled finger. And then, Ryuk flicked his finger toward the gigantic creature, whose shadow covered him as its blade slashed forward, descending upon it. And then, silence. True skill. Anunnaki Oblivion. Level 30. Description: the host summons a massive black sphere of hyperdense nanobots and abyssal energy. A living void that devours everything in its path. Anything caught within its soul, whether solid, energy, or even space itself, is rewritten into absolute nothingness. Singularity detonation: the host can also collapse the singularity itself at will, causing an ancient explosion that wipes everything in a massive radius, leaving behind only the void. Important warning: this skill does not differentiate between enemy and ally. If the host is caught within his own skill, he will be erased too. This was Ryuk's ultimate card. If the battle was one he couldn't win, if he was certain of defeat, then why not simply wipe everything out? Everything. Immediately, the ball of darkness extended toward the gigantic blade that cleaved downward, and in an instant, they collided. The ball, tiny and almost nothing compared to the colossal blade, should have been instantly ripped apart, reduced to nothing upon meeting the blade's edge. Yet everything came to a chilling pause. The entire world, along with its entirety, stood still. Ryuk's smile remained frozen on his face, his most angered expression locked in place, until suddenly, everything was erased to ashes. The edge of the sword slowly faded away like embers drifting in the wind, leaving nothing but the void of darkness. It spread, consuming the giant wielding the blade, reducing him to 1,000 fragments before he too faded into dust. But it didn't end there. The darkness spread through the air, the space hidden beyond, extending toward the hundreds of armies like a gently slithering snake. It passed through their existence, and the moment it touched them, they all faded into nothing, until the entire battlefield, for as far as Ryuk could see, was enveloped in cracks of abyssal blackness. Soon, everything faded into nothing. From the point of Ryuk's figure, the lines of darkness also began extending toward him, inching closer with every breath. They slithered over his body, consuming the space around him. Slowly, Ryuk too began to fade. Suddenly, a creaking sound rang out from the lines of darkness in the air. It was as if the very atmosphere had been placed under a horrifying pressure. And then, the darkness that had devoured everything erupted into a singular, ancient explosion. And in that moment, nothing remained. The battlefield, the armies, the very land itself. All of it was gone, leaving behind only a vast, abyssal void where thousands once stood. Not a single soul was spared. Everything had collapsed into the oblivion. Where am I? Ryuk muttered to himself as he felt control over his body return. In the next instant, his eyes snapped wide open. He looked around frantically, finding a grassy field beneath him. Immediately, he rose to his feet, his eyes flashing with wariness. He halted abruptly, however, as he noticed a figure with long blue hair that trailed on the ground behind her. Her facial features were hidden from him, but in her hands was a watering can, and around her were lush gardens where blue flowers danced to the wind. Clad in a green robe, her figure seemed to somehow blend with her surroundings, almost as if she was part of them. Flutter. The gentle sound of wings filled the air as a butterfly drifted toward Ryuk. He instinctively waved it away before returning his gaze to the mysterious woman. "Who are you?" he asked cautiously, though his mind was already racing. "What happened?" "I unleashed the Anunnaki singularity, and everything suddenly went pitch black. Then I appeared here. What went wrong? Did I defeat the warlock of eternal war?" Ryuk pondered the gaps in his memory, his thoughts blurry. But his attention was immediately drawn back as the woman slowly ceased watering the garden. She turned toward him. For a split second, he stood frozen. The person before him was, in fact, a very beautiful young lady, likely around 19 or 20 years old. A small smile adorned her peach-red lips, nestled perfectly on her glass-skinned white oval-shaped face. Yet when Ryuk looked into her eyes, a cold shiver ran down his spine. Within them were intertwining layers of blue, pulsating pyramid-like patterns that shifted constantly. "Congratulations on passing all the tests in this realm," she said, her voice calm. "And let's just say, I designed this realm myself." As she spoke, the watering can in her hand faded into thin air. She slowly walked toward Ryuk. He took an instinctive step back when she was about 10 meters away. She noticed but ignored it, continuing forward until she was just a few inches from him. Her eyes locked onto his dual-colored irises before her lips moved. "You have many questions, don't you?" she asked. Ryuk nodded. "Then come. Let's go for a small walk." She gestured for him to follow and passed by his side. Ryuk hesitated, his gaze flickering between her and the vast unknown beyond. He wasn't sure whether to obey or ignore her, but in the end he eventually followed. Together, they walked through the grassy plains, with nothing but the ever-changing fields of flowers and the fluttering of colorful butterflies in sight. "This realm was fashioned by me," the woman explained as they continued through the field. "Its primary purpose is to find one who can bring an end to the spawn of the eternal warlock of war. The beast area was the first test," she continued. "That was done purposefully. If one couldn't even reach the peak of the hierarchy of the beasts, their chances of defeating the spawn were non-existent, as you clearly saw in the City of Bones. Those truly were the thousands of test-takers who have failed, mostly due to ignorance and slow thinking. After the body is destroyed, one must then face the eternal warlock of war himself in another battle. None have passed before except you. In fact, you're the first at all. Your attack was also the most powerful of all. It directly countered the warlock of war's power, completely erasing his existence and fully crushing his minions, thus ensuring his absolute defeat. She explained, but Ryuk only felt more confused. "And with the test passed, you were brought here. Do you understand?" "I understand how I got here. What I don't understand is why you never brought an end to the spawn of the eternal warlock of war by yourself instead of creating a whole entire realm, just for something you could have easily ended yourself," Ryuk asked. "I can't kill him, as I've been cursed by the true eternal warlock of war. This realm is a domain of mine that was once locked under a seal, and the warlock of war placed his spawn here, like his stamp, to ensure I could never recall my domain. I was trapped here in another pocket of the world. I needed someone to defeat the spawn, hence removing the stamp placed by the warlock of war. So now you're free," Ryuk completed as she nodded her head. "Yes, I am, thanks to your skill that erased the warlock of war's existence out of my domain," she said. Ryuk furrowed his eyebrows, but his attention was soon diverted to his body. Right now, he looked almost like a holograph. A strange particle oozed out of him continuously, and his form flickered between gaseous and solid. "Your attack didn't just wipe out the spawn of the warlock of war. It also wiped out your soul body too. But you're not dead yet. The body you use now is the little soul that remains anchored to your physical form. If a soul is completely removed from its body, it dies except for a minority few. But if the soul is still tethered, it can undergo a partial separation. The Warlock of War's domain involves defeating a body, summoning its astral body, and then taking control of its will. A little soul will always be left in the body so that when the true soul is defeated, he will also have access to the tethered soul within it, which he can then use to control the body. She explained as Ryuk's eyes flashed, remembering how those skeleton warriors had attacked him. So, the remainder of their souls was still being controlled. He had defeated the Warlock of War, but doing so meant perishing alongside him. However, the flaw that usually worked in his adversary's favor ended up working in his. Now, only a small fragment of his soul remained in his body, ensuring he was still alive. But still, your soul power is too low, just about 30% of your true soul's strength. You're closer to death than ever in this state. The lady as they arrived at the edge of the garden. Below, a vast sea stretched out. A sea of blue liquid, flickering with specks of light, danced on the surface. The sight immediately captured Ryuk's attention. This is the Soul Flora Sea, a natural resource that revitalizes even the faintest soul spark. For you, it won't just restore your soul but even strengthen it further. She spoke as Ryuk's gaze locked onto something, his pupils dilating. Ryuk saw his own bloodied figure suspended in the air, blood still dripping down, looking as tattered as ever. It also rejuvenates the body using the power of Aetheris within. She gestured toward him as Ryuk's body suddenly plunged into the sea, sinking deep into its depths. Instantly, Ryuk felt the connection between him and his body solidify, slowly increasing, awakening in him an urge to jump after it. You can take this as my reward for passing the second and third phases of the test, she said to him. Ryuk looked at her suspiciously for a moment. She had been the one that had almost led him to death, twice now. And now, she was now asking him to jump into some Soul Flora Sea? Should he trust her? The same woman whose ambition had nearly led to the deaths of thousands of test-takers? The same woman who had almost cost him his own life? Before the lady could react, Ryuk's hand suddenly shot out, gripping her wrist. Then, he flung her forward, sending her flying straight into the sea. A loud gasp echoed through the realm as her body splashed into the liquid. With cautious eyes, Ryuk watched as she disappeared beneath the surface. TCH, just as I thought. She's just deceiving me. He was still thinking this when, suddenly, a head burst out of the sea. She emerged, looking at Ryuk with a clearly annoyed expression. That was uncalled for, wasn't it? She asked. Ryuk shrugged before finally jumping in after her. It would be foolish of me to listen to the words of someone who sent hundreds of warriors to their deaths, damning them to an eternal torment of body and soul, Ryuk said as he dived in. The moment his body touched the liquid, he felt something. A strange sensation surged through him, his connection increasing even more. He allowed himself to sink deeper, following the pull. But then, the wave shifted and he saw a figure swimming alongside him. I didn't send anyone to their death. The lady's voice resounded through the waters. They came to this realm searching for worth, and they met their end. Is it my fault they weren't strong enough to get what they wanted? Ryuk raised an eyebrow at her before replying. Sounds like you're just trying to convince yourself that you did the right thing. He mused before soaring down with even more speed. But she kept after him. Just what does she want? Ryuk wondered. But before she could question further, a force overtook him. His body twisted in an instant, and before he knew it, he was inside his physical body once again. The moment he merged, his body started regenerating itself. A few seconds passed before a sudden burst of energy rippled outward. The lady winced as the shockwave sent distortions rippling through the entire sea. In an instant, a massive whirlpool descended. Ryuk's body suddenly started emitting a powerful drag force, causing all the surrounding liquid to be pulled toward him. Her eyes widened in shock as she witnessed the unthinkable. The entire Soul Flora Sea began draining into Ryuk's body like an endless pit, enveloping him in a cocoon of pure Etheric energy. Just, what is happening? Etheric, an energy that allowed the world to bend to one's will. It was said to be the true source of all power, encompassing everything, even apex energy. It was the root of existence itself, the force that wove together reality and all its possibilities. As Ryuk's soul fragments reassembled within his form, he felt a slow response from his body, almost as if he had been in stasis for an eternity. But the sluggishness was fleeting. The moment his soul regained a semblance of wholeness, it instinctively released a powerful, shocking suction force, targeting the Etheric energy saturating the environment. Then, boom! A violent cyclone erupted around him, spiraling into a monstrous vortex of power. The entire Soul Flora Sea responded as if obeying an ancient, forgotten call. Etheric energy surged toward him in chaotic waves, drawn into his very being with unstoppable force. The disturbance sent ripples through the entire region, shaking the sea, shifting its tides, and distorting the space around him. Ryuk gasped. His soul, once fractured, weakened, was now strengthening at an incomprehensible rate. With each passing second, his connection to his body grew firmer, and soon, he could feel every inch of his own form with astonishing clarity. He willed it, and instantly, his nanobody surged back to life. But something had changed. Ryuk expected his nanobots to reconstruct him the way they always had, forming a bony structure to serve as his skeletal foundation. Yet, to his surprise, they did not. Instead of solidifying into rigid support, the nanobots began scaling over each other, layer by layer, leaving tiny gaps between them, creating an intricate, flexible structure unlike anything he had ever experienced before. It was not just a simple change, it was an evolution. For the first time, Ryuk felt like he could control his own body's form in ways that had once been impossible. His previous state had required solid nanobot formations to maintain structural integrity. He could not afford to unsolidify them without consequence. But now, after his evolution, his body had become far more adaptable. He had gained complete, effortless control over his nanobody. He could unstack his nanobots, rearrange them, morph them into something new, something optimized for any situation. It might have seemed like a minor detail to an outsider, but to Ryuk it was revolutionary. This flexibility would change everything. Tactics, combat styles, transformations. His mind was already racing with possibilities, each more devastating than the last. He clenched his fist and watched as the nanobots adjusted, responding to his intent instantly. His efficiency in battle would now skyrocket beyond anything he had previously known. Yet, his transformation was far from over. Even as his body fully reconstructed itself, now superior in every conceivable way, his soul continued absorbing the Etheric energy from the Soul Flora Sea at a terrifying rate. He felt power beyond comprehension surging through his existence, his will refining with it, shaping the energy into something uniquely his own. An overwhelming realization dawned upon him. I feel invincible, Ryuk thought, his expression unreadable. His body rippled as the immense energy coursing through him resonated with his soul. He could feel reality itself responding to his presence, bending ever so slightly to his will. It was as if he was no longer just a part of the world, he was one with it. But then, a voice echoed in his mind, the voice of the blue-scaled Ryuk. __. Etheric is an energy that gives one the illusion of invincibility due to its ability to grant a person's will an effect in reality. But don't be fooled. You're not invincible. Far from it, actually. Ryuk exhaled, regaining clarity. The feeling of omnipotence was deceptive. Yes, his will had strengthened thousands of times over. And yes, his ability to affect reality had reached an unimaginable level. But there were still limits. He had once only been able to harden space, now he could do much more. But true mastery was still beyond him. Watching from the sidelines, a woman stood frozen in shock. Her blue hair shimmered under the glow of the Soul Flora Sea. Her eyes filled with disbelief as she struggled to comprehend the impossible sight before her. Impossible! The Flora Soul Seal, a divine-grade artifact, was only meant to restore Ryuk's soul to its previous level. That was its limit. And yet, before her very eyes, something unprecedented was occurring. Ryuk was not just recovering, he was evolving. His soul was not just being restored, it was absorbing pure, primal Etheric energy at an insane rate and converting it into real power. Her mind raced. He cultivates apex energy already, that much is certain. So how is he also controlling Etheric energy? Could he have an Etheric bloodline? No, even if he did, this much raw Etheric energy should have crushed his soul. He should have imploded by now. Why is he still standing? And the suction force was still growing stronger. Her heart pounded. No, I need to stop him before he drains all of the Flora soul energy. If he takes any more, the divine-grade artifact will be permanently damaged. Her will surged. She tried to lift Ryuk into the air, intending to fling him out of the sea. But, bang! Her power slammed into something invisible, unmovable. Her breath hitched. A barrier. An imperceptible force surrounded Ryuk, an unseen shell of hardened space that rendered her efforts meaningless. What the? I can't penetrate it. She tried again. Nothing. Just then, Ryuk's eyes slowly opened. She stiffened. A circular, incomplete tattoo pulsated across his left eye, emanating Etheric energy in reverse. Then, in an instant, the suction force disappeared. The raging sea stilled. The distortion vanished. Silence. From the now calm waters, a figure emerged. Step by step, Ryuk walked forward on air. He ascended, feet touching the hilltop where they had once stood. He examined his hands, clenching and unclenching them. His skin, smooth and flawless like sculpted ice, gleamed with blue lights formed tattoos that covered his hands. Then, a voice. Congratulations, host, on reaching the next level of Etheric energy. Host has moved from basic to... Ryuk smiled. Finally, the system was back. Excitement surged through him. His thoughts immediately shifted to someone else. Isha. Isha? But before he could leave for the pet world, boom! A monstrous force slammed into the ground nearby, shaking the entire hill. The impact sent waves of energy through the surroundings, even lifting the earth itself. And then, a colossal frost wyvern, 7 meters tall, its icy scales glistening with power, stood before him. Ryuk's breath hitched. Only one name escaped his lips. Isha. Looking at Isha, tears unknowingly welled up in Ryuk's eyes as he hugged the snowy white head, his fist clenching hard in his palm. For as long as the second phase of the test had begun, he had felt his connection with Isha completely severed, almost as if Isha was no longer bonded with him. Even when Isha was away or in the pet world, Ryuk always felt that connection, that firm link deep in his soul. But he had lost it after he had descended down that abyss. His heart had wrenched in agony from losing that connection, and when it suddenly appeared once more, it sent a wave of joy that he couldn't contain. Tears streamed down his face. I thought I'd lost you, he mused to himself. Ryuk had not thought about Isha after that pain, mainly because he had been burdened by his own survival. But now Isha was in his arms once more. Both remained in their position for a while, making the blue-haired lady feel like an outsider. She scraped her leg against the ground from nervousness, briefly warming her throat. Immediately, the tears from Ryuk's eyes faded as he slowly left Isha's embrace before turning back to the lady. Thank you for the soul flora sea. It really helped a lot, he thanked. The lady waved him off while biting her teeth, then glanced back at the Flora Soul Sea, which, compared to its full sea form, now seemed like a mere lake. You almost sucked everything dry though, she mused with a grumbling expression. Ryuk shrugged. Well, you didn't really give me a limit on how much to absorb, did you? Her eyebrows quivered repeatedly in anger, but she eventually cooled it off. She remained silent for a while before she finally spoke again, looking at Isha, who was now staring back at her. Is the frost wyvern just a childhood friend of yours? Or are you a beast tamer? She asked. Ryuk noticed her expression slightly turning to disgust upon mentioning the beast tamer path, something he hadn't witnessed before. But he still replied. Both, he said. She furrowed her brows at him before looking back at Isha, who gazed at her with the same furrowed eyebrows before letting out a huff. Fine, she said. Good. Well, now that I'm done with the test, can you return me back to the forest area? Forest area? She asked, raising an eyebrow as Ryuk nodded. Yes, I'm going back home, he replied, his heart jumping with joy at the thought, only to go cold when he saw the lady flashing him an interested look. Home, huh? Where is your home? What world are you from? She asked, making Ryuk raise an eyebrow. What world? Yes, what world? Or what galaxy, at least? A world called Endearth, he replied. She shook her head. Endearth? Never heard of it. Okay, that's good to hear. Now, can you send me back to the forest area? Ryuk asked, growing a bit impatient. I will, if you tell me the highest cultivation base in your world, she said. Ryuk looked at her suspiciously. He didn't know why she was asking all these questions, but he knew well that the less he told her, the better. But he also wanted to leave this place, and he had no idea how to get back to the forest area. She was his only key unless he wanted to be stuck here. So, in the end, he had no choice but to oblige. The Eternity Stage. That is the highest cultivation base on Endearth, he said. She looked him up and down, making Ryuk feel uncomfortable. The Eternity Stage is your world's highest cultivation level? Like, the most powerful person in your world is at the Eternity Stage, right? She asked. Ryuk nodded. Even though he hadn't seen anyone at the Eternity Stage, or even heard of them, even the Half-Fallen, the strongest being he had ever met wasn't in the Eternity Stage yet. But if such a stage existed, then someone must have reached it before. That is shameful, she suddenly said. Ryuk's eyes flashed. Excuse me? Your world's highest cultivation stage is the Eternity Stage? That's just the beginning stage for cultivation in many upper worlds, she said. Ryuk stared at her for a while before bursting into laughter. You know, that's a really good one. I almost fell for it, Ryuk said, chuckling. The Eternity Stage, the peak of power on Endearth, is just the beginning of cultivation? Now that had to be the funniest joke he had ever heard. Your world is a lower world if the Eternity Stage is your highest cultivation base. Perhaps even a newly awakened world. The world where I came from has some infants born at the Eternity Stage. If you're really serious about what you're saying, then your world level is low. Ridiculously low. Almost like it's a newborn world, she replied. Ryuk shrugged it off. Okay, fine. My world is a lower world. I'm fine with that. Now, can you send me back to the forest area? I go back to my lower world, and you go back to your so-called upper world. And to give it a happy ending, we both never meet again. What do you think? I'm coming with you to your world, she said. Ryuk paused mid-step, his mouth stuck in the same position before he forced out. What? I said. I'm coming with you to your world, she repeated. Looking at her face, Ryuk didn't think she was joking. I'm afraid that's impossible, Ryuk replied without the slightest doubt at all. Bring an alien back to Endearth. She might not look any different from Ryuk himself, but he had no idea who she truly was, except that if she was the one who created this realm, she was undoubtedly an ancient monster. Bringing her back to Endearth? He had no idea what her goals were, no idea what her true power level was. If she wasn't joking about Endearth being a lower world and the Eternity Stage being the beginning of cultivation, something Ryuk highly doubted, but if there was even the slightest chance that it was true, then bringing her back to Endearth would be like bringing in a new force as dangerous as the Nulls. He would essentially be the one that brought Endearth to its knees. Oh, forget the knees to its bellies. He would never do something like that. Ever.